Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Substitute Teaching Info session prepared for McGill students for the fall of 2024. My name is Lara Franko, and I'm the Career Advisor for Faculty of Education here at McGill University. And tonight we're going to learn about substitute teaching, kind of the basics. We're going to talk about different school boards and their expectations, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. All right. So the agenda for tonight, we'll take a look at the portrait of education of Quebec. Some of you may have grown up in Montreal or in Quebec, so you'll already be familiar with this. But some of you are not coming from McGill, not coming from a place where you have information about this. So we're going to do an overview of that just to start. Then I will talk about the typical hiring timelines for teacher positions in Quebec. And then lastly, I will share some ways that you can take action and take ownership of your job search in the area of teaching. Then we will go into application procedures. So I've collected specific school board information from various school boards in the Greater Montreal area, and I'm going to share that with you tonight just so that you have an idea of which ones may be available for you starting now or in the near future for substitute teaching opportunities. We will briefly discuss the Centre de Services Scolaires as well, so the French schools and school boards, and then we will also talk about independent schools before the Q&A. So, what does education in Quebec look like? How are the schools divided? Who is kind of in charge of what different things? So I would say there are three main categories of schools in Quebec. There are English schools, French schools, and Indigenous schools. So within English and French schools, there are the public school boards or the Centre de Services Scolaires. So this is where most children end up going to school in Quebec because this is where the free education is accessible to everyone based off of where you're located. So you would go to your local school based off of your region or the city that you live in. And with those public school boards or Centre de Services Scolaires, I always recommend that you apply to Central Human Resources because Central Human Resources has all the kind of hiring power within the public sector. And applying to them will ensure that you obtain an employee profile and get access to substitute teaching and contracts at all the schools in the board. So doing one application at the central level will give you access to all schools in the board. Okay. There are also Quebec independent schools, both in the English and French sector, kind of divided by two different associations, so the QAIS and the FEEP. For independent schools, you would be applying to each school separately because each school has its own recruitment process and hires its own teachers. So you would not be applying to the central association, you'd be applying to each school individually. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about this. And then finally, Indigenous schools. There are some that are fully independent and others that are part of regional boards like the Cree School Board or Quebec School Board. So you want to, take a look at the school specifically and then see, are they part of a board? Do they operate independently in order to figure out how to apply to those schools for substitute teaching or other opportunities? So to kind of delve deeper into the public sector for school boards in Quebec, there are 9 Anglophone school boards in Quebec, 9 English-speaking school boards. I would say about half on this list are in the Greater Montreal area, so you could apply to them for substitute teaching or other opportunities. And then the last 4 on the list are definitely outside of the Greater Montreal area, so maybe you would want to start your career there in a few years once you finish your degree, but for now, they're not going to be really accessible to you in terms of substitute teaching. Okay. And then there are over 60 Francophone Centres de Services Scolaires in Quebec. So you want to take a look at the ones in the Montreal region. Again, I've just listed 3 here, but for sure there are many, many more. So you want to take a look at the regions you're willing to commute to. For example, there are other Centres de Services Scolaires in Laval or on the South Shore within the Greater Montreal area that I have not listed here. But generally, school boards will have a general call for applications directly on their website, and therefore it is not recommended to apply to individual schools as central HR has a hiring authority. So as I mentioned, private and independent schools hire independently. So you want to approach schools individually or check the association websites. The Quebec Association of Independent Schools has about 25 English schools under its association. Most are in the Montreal region with some exceptions. So again, you want to be double checking. For example, you're not applying to Stansted College, which is in Stansted, Quebec, about 2.5, 3 hours away from Montreal. The FEEP, the Fédération des établissements d'enseignement privé, has about 193 schools. So again, taking a look at their website, sorting by region, seeing which ones are in the Montreal area or are within commuting distance to you would be a good idea before applying. And then if you're looking more broadly across Canada, you can take a look at the Canadian accredited independent schools, some of which are located in Quebec. Here's the compensation for substitute teachers. It was recently updated. So oftentimes I get asked, do you have to sub a full day? Sometimes you're only subbing, especially in the secondary schools, you might be only subbing for one period or several periods of the day, not the full day. So here is the salary scale for substitute teachers in the public sector. So again, at any public school board or at Centre de service scolaire in Quebec. And you can see the salary scale there if you're doing just 0 to 60 minutes all the way up to 211 minutes plus. So here are the typical hiring timelines for teacher candidates in Quebec, but also across Canada. Most provinces follow the same hiring timeline. And I'm going to just give you an idea of this so that you understand maybe why you're not getting a response from human resources, why they might tell you to apply at a different time of year, or that kind of thing. All right. So in February, just a few months from now, will be the biggest event of the year in terms of education career services, which is the career fair. And it's a great way to kick off your job applications within Canada and across Quebec, and a great time to start submitting your applications. March and April, you can continue submitting your applications. You can contact private schools and keep an eye on those independent association websites. You can attend recruitment events at McGill or externally. For example, the Cree School Board comes to our campus every year to recruit McGill students. We even have a speed networking event with the Quebec Association of Independent Schools every March. So you'll get information about those things in the new year, and you can attend those events if you're interested in learning more about recruitment for those types of boards. Some school boards may start interviewing as early as March because this is when they kind of fill their large pool of candidates and get their substitute teaching lists full for the following school year. All right. In March, April, May, and June, typically interviews happen. This happens at the central HR level for the public school boards or, independently with independent schools. So this is when you would be expecting to get interviews for teaching positions or for substitute teaching opportunities. And then finally, in August, any last minute hiring happens. So it's a good time to reconnect with your network, go in person to schools to see if there are any additional needs, especially at, public schools, independent schools, anything like that you have connections with. Remember that, other than teaching, there are a lot of other types of jobs available in schools, like after school monitors, tutors, that kind of thing. So don't get discouraged by today's presentation if you feel like you're not going to be qualified or have the, recommended entry level for substitute teaching. There's lots of other opportunities and ways to get engaged with schools. All right, so here's my recommendations for taking action. So now that we've taken a look at the portrait of education of Quebec, from the big picture down to kind of the school level, what types of options are available. I want you to identify the school boards in your region or the schools in your region that you're interested in applying to, and check those websites regularly to see if there are any new opportunities coming up or any new advice that's coming up for substitute teaching or other positions. Apply regularly to postings, and I'm going to explain what that means in a minute. Send cold applications. So for example, if you feel like you did a great job in one of your field experiences or one of your teaching internships, follow up with that principal or follow up with the teacher that you had and see if they have any way to help you navigate the process with human resources and get you a job at the school. Contact employers to see if they're hiring, right? So what I mean by this is, principals know who they need in their particular school, so they may be able to assist you with any of the hiring needs at their school, or they might know a principal at the school down the street that is looking for tutors or after-school monitors or something like that. Network with schools in your area and people in the field. The field of education is quite small, especially in the Montreal area. It seems like every teacher seems to know, half a dozen other teachers in other schools and that kind of thing. So always ask for referrals, stay in touch with your cooperating teachers, your supervisors, your principals, etc. If you're interested in a particular school, say an independent school or a school that specializes in something specific, like sports, or has a great theater program that you're interested in, I would recommend you reach out to those teachers and see if you can set up a career conversation, which is a conversation where you're not necessarily asking for a job, but you're asking for advice. You're asking about their career. You're seeing, how they got to where they are today, and really expanding your knowledge and seeing if they have any additional nuggets of wisdom to pass on to you. Get your foot in the door. So if you're in a field experience, it's highly recommended that you get involved in an after-school club, a sports team, an activity that you can continue after your field experience is over, right? Then you still have, your face in the school at a regular basis. So if any jobs or any paid positions come up, you're front and center. They're thinking of you. Your face is there regularly, so they'll think of you for that opportunity. Like I said, there could be tutoring, extracurriculars, teachers' assistants, volunteers, that kind of thing. All of these things will help boost not only your CV, but your chances of getting hired for any openings that come up. Finally, let your friends and family know that you're looking. Education is a smaller community than we may think. And again, those referrals seem to really happen quite often in the field of education. I've also included here the links to the Career Update newsletter, which you should all be receiving on a weekly or biweekly basis to your McGill email inboxes with any opportunities that are sent my way that I want to share with students. And I recommend you follow our Instagram page as well, because it's an easy way to stay on top of any news or updates that we hear about in the education community. So when I said, apply regularly to job postings, what I mean is many school boards, for example, the CSSDM, reset their recruitment bank every year. So you'll see on their job postings even now that they say that the deadline, I believe, is June 2025. So if, for example, you've applied now, they haven't gotten back to you, maybe they don't think you have enough experience yet, and it gets past June 2025, it means you need to apply again. They're not going to keep your information on file. Or, you can apply another time and update your information and update your application and documents if your situation has changed. For example, you've passed a French test, your address has changed, or you have added more experience to your CV. All right, so now we're going to get into each school board in the Montreal area and their recommendations and their requirements for substitute teaching. So for the English Montreal School Board, I know I asked in the registration form for this info session which school boards students are interested in substitute teaching at, and EMSB came up quite often. So right now, EMSB does their substitute teaching hiring through email. So you would email your CV and your cover letter to jobs@emsb.qc.ca. They recommend that candidates hold a completed teaching degree or a bachelor's in a teachable subject in order to be considered for substitution. So what this means is, yes, unfortunately, they're most likely going to be looking for students who have completed their degree at McGill. So you would pretty much be only applying for this in your final year. Or if you're in a McGill teacher education program, like the B.Ed, but you're in the fast track program because you have a bachelor's degree already in a teachable subject like math, science, or something of that sort, you may be considered eligible for substitution now. while you're completing your McGill degree to be a certified teacher. I will say there is a little note here. Student teachers in their FE3, so their third field experience or their fourth field experience, if you're doing your field experience at an EMSB school, you may be exceptionally granted a substitution card for that particular school. So only the school you're currently doing your field placement in, and only at the request of the principal. So the principal has to give you an endorsement and say, yes, Lara is ready to substitute teach at my school, and they're responsible for you as a substitute. And you would be restricted to that school only. There would be really specific hiring procedures that apply. Okay. So as I mentioned, it's not going to be really possible for you to become a substitute teacher before your FE3 with EMSB. So you do have to wait until graduation. You will have to go through an official interview with Human Resources. That would happen in the March-April timeframe, like I shared at the beginning of this info session. And then you would be, if you do successfully pass your interview, you will then be granted a substitute teaching card. You'll be given access to all schools within the EMSB. So Lester B. Pearson School Board, this school board starts in LaSalle, Lachine, goes all the way to the West Island and beyond. So you do want to view and follow the instructions on the teaching section of the Join Our Team website. Here are the requirements for eligibility to substitute. A legal qualification to teach, so a brevet or a permis from the Ministry of Education. You need to have completed your B.Ed or MATL with brevet pending. And again, they have a similar exception to EMSB. So if you're in your third or fourth year of the B.Ed program, or if you're in an MATL program on field experience or internship, with an LBPSB school, you may be considered for emergency substitution at that school specifically. Again, it has to come with a special request and a strong endorsement from the school principal. So this will, again, restrict you to that school specifically, and you will not have access to Scalago, which is their general substitute teaching platform, to have access to all schools. Some more information about LBPSB. So how to become a full substitute and open an employee file. So the first option is if you are in your Bachelor of Education and you're completing your FE4 in one of their schools, you should have an interview with the school principal during this field experience, and therefore you will not have to attend the recruitment session in March, April. Or option two, for anyone who's completing their FE4 not at a Lester B. Pearson school, the information for those applications will be posted on the board website in February, around the same time as the career fair. The 2025 recruitment will be virtual interviews conducted by principals. And a special note, they always recommend that if you are able to teach in French, this is a great asset and you should indicate that clearly on your CV. Once you are approved for hire, then you'll be sent an employee kit and authorized for Scalago, which is the automated substitution platform, and then you will have access to substitute teach at any of their schools. And a reminder that this is for graduating students only. So unless you've had that special permission from your FE3 or FE4 principal, you're most likely not going to have the ability to substitute teach at a Lester B. Pearson school board school until you are completed with your degree. All right, moving on to Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board. So this is Laval, Lanaudière, kind of northern, north of Montreal region, going all the way up to like Mont-Tremblant. They will prioritize certified teachers to be added to the substitution list. However, any B.Ed student who has completed 30 credits or more in education courses, so I believe that would be a full year of study. So after your first year, you could apply and enroll for substitute teaching opportunities. So this school board, is a possibility for those who are able to commute to Laval or who live in Laval and who want to get started with substitute teaching starting in their second year of their B.Ed. You can send your CV to HR secretary at swlauriersb.qc.ca or visit their careers page. You will then be sent a list of documents required in order to open your file. So things like ID, your transcripts from CEGEP, from university, all sorts of other documents and information that they need. And then once all your required documents have been received, your file will be open in their absence management system. And then you'll be given a username and password, which will allow you to access and apply for available substitute jobs in Soroffa-Laurier School Board schools. So this is an option starting in your second year. Riverside School Board also has kind of an order of priority, and you would submit your online application through the application portal on Workland Atlas, and I've linked it here. Riverside School Board welcomes any MATL and U3, U4 students to apply to do substitution. So again, you need to do, I think, at least your second field experience, if not third, in order to be considered qualified for substitute teaching. However, if you complete an internship or a field experience in this school board, you may not be required to do an interview, but a reference from the school principal is needed. So similar to EMSB and Lester B. Pearson, you may need a principal's endorsement, but the difference here is that you will likely have access to all schools in Riverside School Boards, not just the one where the principal has given you endorsement for. So if you're interested in applying, please check their jobs website. The New Frontier School Board, Chateauguay, Valleyfield, etc., kind of South Shore, but West, they continuously accept applications for new substitute teachers. We have a great relationship with them. So if you have any questions, let me know and I'll connect you with their recruiter. You can submit your application on their jobs website. You can select teaching jobs. Or, as I said, we have a great connection with Kim Porter, so you can email her directly with your CV and she'll find something for you at her board. So again, there's an order of priority, but Kim will accept or at least review any CVs that come her way and see if she can find something within NFSB for you. So of course, the order of priority would be someone with a teaching license, or those who are currently in an education program leading to a teaching license and have completed at least 30 credits or 1 year. Or if you have a different undergrad degree before your B.Ed or before your MATL in a related field, and you have had experience working with students, then you would be considered as well. All right, so I think that covers all of the English school boards in the Greater Montreal area. For the Centre de Services Scolaires, pretty simple. You go on their websites, you look for available postings under enseignement. You can contact HR directly. I will say for the CSSDM, I have heard from students recently that they do require the CFranc or the CEL completed before you apply. So some students have applied, have been called for a pre-screening interview, and have been asked quite early on in that pre-screening whether they've completed the CFranc or the CEL, which are French proficiency exams. And without those exams, they aren't able to move forward to the next stage in the hiring process. Okay, so make sure you take a look at those, and we'll be having a French proficiency test info session a little bit later this semester, which you can review and you can prepare yourself for one of these tests. The Centre de Services Scolaires Marguerite-Bourgeois, that's more in the western part of Montreal and the island. You also would look on their website under enseignement, but you can also book a 15-minute phone call with someone in their recruitment department or in HR. So this is a unique feature, so you can call them. They might guide you to which job posting you should apply to. They might tell you a little bit more about the current situation in their school board, and they might be able to give you some clarifying information about the recruitment process. So I think that's a really unique feature. And if you live west of downtown, anywhere within the West Island, I recommend you book one of those 15-minute phone calls to see what's possible for you in terms of substitute teaching. The Centre de Services Scolaires de la Pointe de l'Île is east of downtown Montreal, going all the way out to RDP. And then you'll be completing the online application. And if you have any questions, even before you apply, I highly recommend you email them. They're quite responsive by email, and they would be happy to answer your questions if you're interested and you live in the area and you want to substitute teach with them. All right, and as I mentioned, for the independent schools, You would either send your CV to the head of school or HR via email, so you can take a full list of the schools there, or you can always check the QAIS careers page or Emploi FEP for their up-to-date hiring needs. I think I checked QAIS careers this afternoon, and they were looking for some after-school monitors and homework helpers and that kind of thing. So yes, it's not substitute teaching, but it's still an opportunity for you to get your foot in the door at an independent school. And luckily, most of those independent schools are quite close to McGill campus, either in Westmount or in NDG. So not too far if you're thinking about going there after class or finding a part-time job at one of those schools. So the current circumstances, we went through a global pandemic several years back. This really created a shift in the teaching profession in Quebec, across Canada, and even internationally. So as a result, McGill changed their substitute teaching policy. So if you're in your FE3, your FE4, or your internships for the MATL students, we now have a policy where you can act as a substitute teacher for your CT in those placements. Okay. So if you have any questions about that, I'm not the right person to go to. I'd highly recommend you go to the placements team and you can email them directly. You also can get up-to-date information using Facebook groups. I know they're a bit maybe considered old school for students of your generation, but a lot of teachers are still avid Facebook users. So you can join the Quebec Teachers Group. Anyone can join it. I'm a part of it. And I noticed that if anyone has a question about subbing or about getting hired, or anything like that, the community really, within a few hours, you can get some responses from experienced teachers about your situation or any advice that you are looking to receive. I believe the AMSB and the LBPSB substitute teachers Facebook groups are closed, so you can only join those if you have an employee number or an employee email. But these are great informal places where teachers post, I need a sub tomorrow. Can someone help me out? And then, you kind of comment on it, or you contact them on Facebook and you arrange to substitute teach for them that day. And then finally, in the news, even this year, even in August 2024, Quebec announced a shortage of 5,700 teachers for the coming school year. I would say that these shortages are less common in the Montreal area just because we tend to have a higher population and more teachers available to fill positions. They're also less common in the English sector because, again, we have generally enough teachers to fill the roles at EMSB, Lester B. Pearson, etc. But they're more common, these teacher shortages, in the Francophone sector or in rural or semi-rural areas. So, still good chances for all of you to get hired as teachers or substitute teachers upon graduation. But coming up to that, in the downtown Montreal area, as I've mentioned in this info session, EMSB, Lester B. Pearson School Board, and CSSDM do have quite strict hiring requirements, even for students in Bachelor of Education programs. So you might have to look a bit further afield into the suburban or the semi-rural regions if you want to get started substitute teaching throughout your degree. So as I mentioned, if you have any questions about your placements, or if you have any questions about substitute teaching in your FE3 or your FE4, your placement coordinators are now available on Teams, and you can use MS Bookings to book a time with them. So I'd recommend you can call them with a quick question. So they're in our office every day, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. If you want to give them a quick call, ask your questions, or stop by our counter, the ISA office is on the second floor of the education building. Someone will be happy to give you some advice regarding that as well. But here's the information to book with them as well if you're interested in booking a meeting on Teams. All right, so we've come to the question portion. Thank you to all who submitted your questions in advance when you registered for this session. I've included some here and I'm going to go over them, but feel free as I'm kind of going through this list, if you have any more questions that come up, use the chat function and I'll be happy to take a look at those as well and answer some of those before we conclude today's session. All right. So the first question that everyone asks is, can I apply for substitute teaching without a full license? And I've gone over this a few times in today's info session. So it depends, right? Um, it depends on which school board it is, if it's an independent school, if it's a public school, whether you've completed your field experience there or not. So make sure you listen back to this session for all the specific school board information. In some cases, yes. In other cases, not so much. Okay. Do you need a certain level of education to be qualified? So I would say in most cases, if you do have a bachelor's degree already, before entering the B.Ed or the MATL program, chances are you may be considered for substitute teaching already. Um, but again, your best chances are with a full teaching license. Do you need to finish the EETC, the English Exam for Teacher Certification, before applying to substitute teaching jobs? Yes, it's highly recommended. It's often seen as a requirement to enter substitute teaching jobs. So make sure you have that completed as soon as possible. And as I mentioned earlier, most school boards, even the ones who have a bit more lenient qualifications, are still looking for you to finish 30 credits in education at the McGill level before subbing. So you have to finish your first full year. Can you be a substitute teacher if you're not from Canada? Can someone who isn't from Quebec do substitute teaching in Quebec? So I'm going to answer the first one first. If you're not from Canada, you want to make sure you have a work permit, even if it's a student work permit, in order to substitute teach here. Without that sorted out, and even I've heard from a student earlier this week from the US who graduated in the spring, but his work permit is not specifically for the teaching profession. So he had to reapply and get a new permit specifically for teaching. So you want to make sure that your work permit is valid and is valid specifically for teaching jobs. Okay. If you're not from Quebec, and you're from a different Canadian province, then you have a social security number with Canada. You are eligible to teach here because you're eligible to work here. Is it possible to work in multiple school boards? How will this affect my teacher's seniority? Okay. So pretty simple. Yes, you can work in multiple school boards. However, this may slow down your seniority. So the experience you build in one school board is not transferable to other school boards. This is because each school board has its own unions, so it protects its own employees, and you can't jump from one union to the other and carry your experience with you. That being said, generally speaking, our students are quite young. You have a long road ahead of you in terms of your career. So I think it might be a good idea to substitute at different school boards, see which one you like the best before kind of putting all your eggs in one basket and dedicating your whole career to one school board. But just be aware that it may slow down a little bit, not too much, but it may slow down a little bit your opportunities to be on what's called the recall list or to gain seniority in a particular school board. And what I mean by that is if a contract becomes available, the principal has to follow certain HR policies and procedures and has to interview those who have applied with the most years of experience within that particular school board. Okay. And if that's something you need clarification on, I'm happy to re-explain that as well. Does Bill 21 affect substitute teachers as well? So unfortunately, yes, Bill 21, for those of you who are not aware, it bans wearing religious symbols in the workplace. So anyone who wears any religious symbols like a hijab or a kippah or any other form of religious symbol, as an employee, that is not permitted to, you wouldn't be permitted to be hired as a substitute teacher, unfortunately. This only goes for the public sector. I want to clarify that. So it only is considered for EMSB, Lester B. Pearson, all those public school boards. However, if you are applying to independent schools, we've had great success with many students affected by Bill 21, many graduates affected by Bill 21, great success in being hired in the independent schools as they don't have to follow Bill 21 because they are private institutions. Okay. Another clarification I want to make is that it does not affect your field experiences. So even if you wear a religious symbol, you may still be allowed to, you will still be allowed to do your field experience in a public school because you're not technically an employee there, right? You're a student, you're learning, you're interning, for lack of a better term, at that school. You're not a paid employee, therefore, you may be placed in a public school. However, I would recommend you ask the placement coordinators on your request form if you're interested in gaining a network in the independent schools or gaining experience in the independent schools to help build your career and lay that foundation for the future, you can always request that on your placement form or talk to your placement coordinator about it. How much notice are you normally given for a substitute teaching opportunity? So the answer to this may vary. I've seen on the substitute teaching Facebook pages, for example, sometimes people put requests out, hey, next month I have a dentist appointment. I need a sub for the morning. So that's a month of notice, right? Sometimes teachers, they get ill overnight or their child gets ill overnight and they need to find a sub for that day. They might call you at 6:30 in the morning and say, hey, can you go in and sub for me today? So that's only a few hours notice. So it can range from the opportunity. I would say that most teachers kind of have their list of favorite subs. So that's why networking is important. And letting them know, for example, if you're still a student, which days you're free for subbing, which days you don't have class, or which days you're able to not go to campus. And then they'll be like, "Ooh, I know Lara's available on Thursdays. If I ever need a sub on a Thursday, I know I can call Lara and she'll be available." Okay. So I know for sure networking is going to be important in order to get subbing opportunities. Is it possible to substitute in elementary despite being a high school teacher? I guess, or vice versa. Yes, it's possible. There's nothing really that restricts you from dabbling or trying out different age groups. Again, this might be a little bit different depending on the school board, but I know certain school boards have the flexibility. I had a student employee a few years ago who was, I think, completing her bachelor's of education in secondary science. She registered and signed up and was, hired as a substitute teacher at a particular school board. And she tried elementary phys-ed. She tried, grade 5. She tried kindergarten. She tried high school. Eventually, she kind of, settled in and started emphasizing substitute teaching at the secondary level. But then they didn't restrict her at that point to substitute teaching at a particular level, whether it was elementary or high school. Are there any substitute teaching opportunities during the summer? Yes, there are. So there are some high schools that do remedial education over the summer. There are some private schools that do courses over the summer for their students. So there may be substitute teaching opportunities during the summer as well. Making sure that you're letting people know you're available is a great way to get started, and asking around, especially at the career fair, you might want to ask this question if that's something you're available for and you want to get experience in. All right, I have time for more questions. Let's see if I have some in the chat here. Um, oh, okay. Is a teaching degree valid within Canada? And if so, does each province have their own version of the EETC? I'm not sure if other provinces have their version of the EETC, but I would think that they would consider the EETC as equivalent. I've helped a lot of students over the years get teaching certification in Ontario and BC and other provinces. It is transferable. There's a cross-Canada agreement between provinces where if you've been in a teacher education program in Quebec, it will be valid in another province. You just do have to do an application and often pay a small fee in order to get your degree looked at, to get all your documents validated, and then you would be granted a teaching permit in a different province. So it's fairly straightforward. If you have any clarifying questions, I'm happy to answer them. There's a student at MATL, and a large portion of their classmates sub already, and they're eager to start. They worked in as a tutor in one school. Many teachers, said they would love to have me as a sub. You were in contact with EMSB. Okay. Yeah, you could Yeah, I would say the same thing. So the student is explaining that HR told them to connect with teachers and with the principal and have them kind of pull your application through. Yes, it would very much be worth asking the teachers and asking the principal for that recommendation and to kind of push HR to hire you for that particular school. Yeah. So those connections are really, really helpful. Based off of the second to last question, is it possible to sub in high school despite being an elementary teacher? Yeah, so it's possible to sub at any level. I even know I have a friend of mine who finished his degree in Phys-Ed and has never taught Phys-Ed since graduating. He has taught, at the secondary level, all sorts of other subject areas except for Phys-Ed. So as much as McGill kind of restricts you to a particular subject area, to a particular level, on your brevet d'enseignement, it does not say, Lara is only certified to teach kindergarten, elementary, point final, right? Um, it really depends on the principal who's hiring, the school board and their flexibility. But overall, in Quebec, you're not restricted to a particular level for your whole career or for subbing. Um, so you may need to, review some of the information that I shared. There was a question here that said, do you need to be at a certain level to substitute? Yes and no. So certain school boards are a little bit more picky than others. This recording will be available for you to review back and review the information that I shared earlier. Um, to be able to teach more than one subject, I think I already covered that one. Do we need to pass a specific French exam in order to substitute in a French school board? So right now for the CSSDM, yes, they are requiring that you complete either the CFranc or the CEL. And for other school boards, sometimes they just, they obviously conduct the interview in French and they kind of test your French proficiency in that way. Some of them will still hire you, but require that you take the CFranc or the CEL within the first 6 months of your employment. So they'll circle back to you within 6 months and say, hey, sorry, we can't keep giving you subbing jobs until you finish one of those French exams. All right. All right. I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you all so much for joining me.